So you don't need more random Kickstarter tips to get your comic book funded. Hey everybody, Tyler James here. I'm the publisher of Comics Tribe. I'm the founder of Comics Launch Pro, which is a training program and community where I help writers, artists, comic creators, and self-publishers build engaged audiences and then launch awesome projects to them on Kickstarter and beyond. And if you are a comic book creator who's looking to launch on Kickstarter, I put together a really great resource for you, which is available over at comicslaunch.com/roadmap. This is a free resource which will give you the roadmap to planning your first or next successful Kickstarter launch. And you may be thinking, Tyler, wait a minute. You're offering me Kickstarter tips, and you're saying in this video that you don't need more Kickstarter tips. What, could you be more oxymoronic? Could you be more just contradictory right off the bat? Well, let me explain here. The truth is, too many tips, too many strategies, too many tactics can actually do more harm than good. And the reason I wanted to jump in and share this idea with you is that the other day, in a free masterclass that I give, I have a masterclass where I spend about an hour with you, with creators, and I basically lay out my entire system for planning, launching, funding, and fulfilling Kickstarter campaigns. And within that masterclass, there's a ton of tips, there's a ton of strategies, there's lots of examples, and as well as plenty of examples from creators that I've worked with. But there was one creator that attended this workshop and masterclass, and 5 minutes in, he's like, we're 5 minutes in, I don't have any tips. 10 minutes in, where's the tips? Show me your tips, Tyler. Show me your damn tips, right? I came here for the tips. And it was like he was so focused on just give me these tips that he was missing the larger point and context of my presentation. And so while most people that attend the class get a tremendous amount of value from it, and I get a lot of nice things from people that attend that free class, and they reply back and say it was very helpful, occasionally some people just aren't going to get or didn't get exactly what they came for. But it's sort of, I get a little defensive like anyone when people are criticize the work that you put out, especially the work that you put out into the world for free. And it made me kind of want to spit back at him and be like, oh, you want tips? You think I can't give you tips? All right, I'm going to give you 10 tips in 10 seconds. 1, offer multiple versions of your comic at a different price point. 2, include an early bird reward. 3, offer milestone bonuses before you start thinking about stretch goals. 4, avoid oversized prints unless you're charging a premium, as they aren't easy to ship cheaply. 5, share other people's projects during your launch and then tell those creators about it. 6, hold a few pledge levels in reserve and roll them out during your launch. 7, build an email list launch months before you launch and then email them regularly in the lead up to your launch. 8 or 7, that was 7, I think. Or 6, 7, hold a few pledge levels in reserve, roll them out during your launch. 8, turn your Kickstarter project video into a Facebook ad and run it to drive traffic to your campaign. 9, outsource your shipping to your printer if you can. And 10, buy a Dymo label 4XL and a subscription to ShipStation if you're doing fulfillment by yourself. So took a little bit more than 10 seconds, but I can knock out tips left and right if I wanted to, if I had to. And honestly, if you go back and listen to all of those tips that I just spit at you, those are gold. Like all of those tips, like collectively, those tips have made me or saved me tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars and tens, if not hundreds of hours of my time unpacking those things in terms of improving my launches. But if you were watching this and you heard me just spit out all those tips to you, the question I would have for you is, having just digested those tips, do you feel any better about your readiness to launch or to launch bigger on a platform like Kickstarter? Like after just digesting tip? Probably not. The truth is, like most creators, it's not more tips that they need to succeed. Now, when I launched my first successful Kickstarter for a comic book anthology graphic novel project, there were not the resources out there that there were today in terms of funding a project on Kickstarter. In fact, the early days of Kickstarter, the success rate was much worse than it is today. And especially in the comics category, most of the projects that I backed failed miserably. Eventually, a few started to hit, and some of the best practices that we now all know and respect started to come to light. But before, in the lead up to my first successful Kickstarter, there were maybe a dozen articles out there on successfully launching comic book projects on Kickstarter, and I devoured them all. And there was, very few in the comics category, and I devoured all the ones in the game space and the art space, and even some of the other categories like music and film. Like I was able to like literally devour them all. But if I were a creator just starting out right today, and I Googled Kickstarter tips or even comic book Kickstarter tips, like it would just be a flood. There's a massive amount, right? And the problem with consuming tips, and I know that, I'm saying this, I'm someone who has given on a podcast that I've been doing for 5 years. I've been giving out tips, like hundreds of tips. And it's not like I'm not giving out my best tips. My best tips are all on the podcast. But the problem with tips is that tips without context and outside of a larger system or a larger strategy, like they're a lot of times contradictory, and depending upon what your goals are or where you're at, they might be useless to you, or just not what you need, or not the most important thing to be focusing on. And so like if you search for Kickstarter tips, you're going to have one creator that says, absolutely do not discount any of your pledges, right? You want to compete on value instead. And then you'll have another successful creator say, best thing I did was offer early backer discounts, and that got thing off to a great start. You'll see creators in the crowdfunding space argue, sometimes, super passionately, Kickstarter is the best. No, Indiegogo is the best. No, Kickstarter sucks. No, Indiegogo sucks. You suck. And that's a lot of like what's going on in a lot of conversations, and that just will overwhelm you. And then you'll see people like, oh, Kickstarter works better for graphic novels. No. Best thing to do is to release single issues of your comics and serialize them, and people back and forth. And again, just the truth is, too many tips can overwhelm you. They can paralyze you. But what instead will really help, if you're really looking to level up your game, is to have a structure or a system or a plan, and then a commitment to follow through on that plan to the end, evaluate your results, determine what worked from that, and then try to do better with your next launch. For example, if your goal was to lose 10 pounds, you could Google it. How do I lose 10 pounds? And what's going to happen is you're going to find lots of articles with lots of contradictory advice. There'll be articles that say eat more of the right food and less of the wrong food. Some will say drink more of this, drink less of that, cut fats, cut carbs, eat this, don't eat that, like exercise this way, exercise that way. And if you then try to cobble together your own approach from those random tips, and then run that on your own, like how much success do you think you're going to have? A much better approach would be to pick one overall strategy, not a series of just random tips, but to find one overall plan and follow that from point A to the end. Tips, the lone tip, the loose tip, rarely gets you from point A to your end result. But what will get you from where you are to where you want to be is a complete roadmap or a system where each tip and strategy and tactic fits within that system. And, a lot of times people will look at me and they'll say, well, Tyler, like, why do people, like, if you give all of your tips on the Comics Launch podcast, if you give all your best stuff on the Comics Launch podcast, which is free and available on iTunes or Spotify or Stitcher, et cetera, like, why would people ever pay you any money to join your Comics Launch Pro program? Like, why would they be paying you for tips? And the answer is they're not paying me for tips, right? They're paying me because they want to follow a system, and they want to get my support as they do it, and they want to join a community of over 200 successful creators that have learned this system and are implementing it and doing it each and every month. And so, a lot of times the difference between tips is stuff that I can put a tip out there and maybe it'll work for you, maybe it won't. And so that's why, like, when I coach inside my program, I'm rarely just giving out answers, because when someone asks a question, rarely do I have all the information that I need to give them the correct answer without first probing in. And so the right tip is situational context, is contextual for situations. And the right tip for your situation may be exactly the wrong tip for a creator with a different project, a different priority, a different goal. And so it's not that tips are bad. It's not that I'm someone like, hey, I'm studying this. I'm going to go see what is out there, what some ideas. I'm struggling with X, Y, and Z, or I'm trying to find some information about X, Y, and Z. I'm all about going and seeing what best practices or tips are out there. But if I decide that, hey, I'm going to go on a journey, and it's going to be a significant journey, it's going to be a life-changing journey, like, and I really want to get a level of mastery for it, I realize I don't need just a few tips and then I'm going to be golden. I want to find a coach that's done what I want to do. I want to find a actual system, like a complete system, not just random tips, but a complete start to finish system or process that I can follow, that's proven to work. And ideally, I also want to do it with other people that are sort of on this journey with me. And so that's sort of the difference between, what we do inside of the Comics Launch Pro community, and then what I do and what I offer on the podcast and other things. And so many of you have all of the tips and the tactics and the strategies. Like, you probably have more than you need to succeed on the Kickstarter platform. It's really going to just come down to your commitment to following through with following through with the program and the best practices that you've decided are right for you, or the roadmap that you've been presented, executing on that, and then going back and doing the diligent after action report work on what worked, what didn't, what can I do more of, what should I do less of, and how do I launch bigger and better next time. And sometimes the best way to do that is within a community. All right. And so again, I just wanted to share that. And the funny thing was that that creator that was in my workshop, and it's like, give me tips. He bailed out at about minute 25. And at minute 25, he bailed out and he missed the tips that came at the end of the program or throughout the program. But he also missed one of the biggest things that I was doing in the early part, where I was sharing a little bit more about my story, and I was sharing more about my journey, and I was sharing how Kickstarter took me from where I was sort of struggling and to where I am now, in terms of having the success that the Comics Tribe has been able to have, and the funding success, and getting into new channels and doing all that things. And what he missed was a great, powerful Kickstarter tip, which is that as awesome as your product is, as awesome as the thing that you're offering to your prospective backers or customers is, the story behind it and how it came to be in a crowdfunding launch is equally as important. If people know your story, know what you're about, know what makes you tick, know what is the kind of thing that, and know that you've sort of been on this process for a while, you've been in this game for a while. If they know that, then they're far more likely to take action and get involved in you and your work. And so by the creator just trying to get to, just give me the details, give me the specifics, he was missing that bigger lesson. And he's probably going to be the creator that then goes and launches a Kickstarter campaign and launches a Kickstarter project and puts up a page that is solely 100% focused on, here's my book. And there's no sense of the journey that the creator's been on. There's no sense of how important this book is to him or his team or who the team is. And as a result, it's going to get less action and activity on the Kickstarter platform. And so, again, there's a method to my madness. I've been doing this for 5 years plus. And so, if you don't have the results that you've been looking for, maybe, just maybe, you should listen to some people that have done some of the things that you're trying to do, and trust that they might actually have a better approach to conveying that information to you than the approach that you are sort of asking them for. Because I got to tell you, spitfiring tips, the lists, the bullet points, like all that stuff, like most of that stuff goes in one ear and out. But it's what you do within the context of what your goals are, and the system that you're following in a coherent sort of step-by-step systematic process. Like, that's the thing that gets you results that are on a whole other level. All right. And so, again, would love to, for you guys, if you haven't grabbed it already, to just go grab the Comic Book Kickstarter Roadmap, comicslaunch.com/roadmap. I think you'll find it helpful. And I think you'll find the way it's laid out for you is to be something that feels achievable, something that you can do, and something that ideally helps you move forward towards your next successful comics launch. Thanks so much for watching. Can't wait to see what you launch next.